Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlocked Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and it's my pleasure to be here with you guys this morning. Have I got a special guest for you guys? I think you're going to be in for a super duper treat. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be speaking with the amazing Zahra Karsan, who's the CEO of Get Zend. She's an inspirational speaker, success coach to global CEO executives, and she's just announced her very second book. I love writers, love authors. We too have just announced our second book, so I totally know the journey that you've been on, Zahra. In her second book, she talks about 6 weeks to happiness, which is the ultimate roadmap to retrain your brain for better health, greater abundance, and long-lasting happiness. This book debuted at #1 on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and has hit the charts at #2 on the Wall Street Journal. So congratulations to you. And it's a step-by-step guide that actually helps you to train your brain and rewire your brain to break the cycles of stress, anxiety, depression, and to improve your overall mental health and emotional well-being. So I want to say a huge big congratulations for releasing your second book. That is fantastic that it's hit the charts in such a big way, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that amazing introduction. I'm so excited to be here.
Well deserved. Zahra was telling me that she's based in Miami, Florida, and I absolutely love that place. We were there, my husband and I, we've been a few times to Florida, and we just love that place. So
Yes.
and I look at that and go, wow, how can you not be happy living in such an amazing environment that you do there in Florida, so close to everything, in the Bahamas and what have you. So one of the things that I said to Zahra this morning was that I wanted to talk to her about this journey that she's been on, and how does she get to the point where she wanted to actually be someone who was talking to people about how to rewire themselves to be happy. So we might do a little bit of a walk through, walk through time, and get her to share with us what her background is, and how did you actually get to this place of writing a book about happiness? How did that come about?
Well, it was a very long journey. I'd say a good 30 years, if not my entire life. So where it got started was I was really born in South Africa during apartheid, which is, as you can imagine, a politically and socially challenging time. And, I was so young when I lived there, you can't really comprehend or process the sort of challenges you're experiencing. You just know you're living in a segregated society. And so you've got frustration and confusion and discrimination, and none of it really makes sense to you. So I think it's the human journey to try and reason with ourselves, and we try and add meaning and tell ourselves a story to explain some of the phenomenon that are happening around us and make sense of the world, essentially. And I think the story I told myself at a really young age was, oh, well, why can't I be on that beach? Because the beaches are reserved for the whites, for example. And the story I told myself in that moment was, well, I guess I'm not good enough for whatever reason, the color of my skin or my gender, whatever it was in that moment. And that was the little story that ran as my operating system in the background for many years. And as I grew up, I just said, well, that good enough story, that's not my story. That's not good enough for me. I'm going to figure out how to break through that sort of glass ceiling, if you will, and figure out what it is that conditions us with all of these little stories that we tell ourselves, the ones that create fear and self-doubt and self-sabotage patterns, and how can we move beyond. And so I became really interested in studying happy people, successful people, and what seemed to separate them from the rest. It's a weird way to explain this, but I was always really drawn to those people that had that little sparkle in their eye. Like they knew the secret that we were all trying to figure out, the secret to unlocking, which is why I love your show, and the whole concept of unlocking and tapping into how we can be the best version of ourselves. And that started my journey. So I started to study. I did my undergrad in psychology. I was just fascinated with human behavior and the human journey and the conditions we create for ourselves, and how to move past and how to move beyond. And then that wasn't enough. I needed to study neuroscience. I needed to study the subconscious. So I did my training in neurolinguistic programming and in hypnotherapy, because I really wanted to understand the workings of the subconscious. And I came to understand that we're actually 5% conscious mind, 95% subconscious, unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And most of our behavior happens at the subconscious level. So I thought, 5%, but that's so tiny. How can that even be? And I came to realize, well, it's true. When you look at all of the data, you look at how we interact in love or with money and wealth or in life in terms of where we are and where we want to be in terms of creating that life of our dreams. Some people want to travel and they do it. So many of us, though, want to travel and live a life that's exciting and adventurous and, you know, that lights us up, but we just don't know how to get there. And so I became fascinated with the gap. I was like, what is this gap? And what separates those highly happy and successful people from the rest? And how can I figure out how to unpack that, unlock all of his tiny little secrets, and then be able to put a package together and teach that to people? And, I don't think it was my intention right at the beginning. I really just wanted to understand it for myself. And then once I unpacked it and I studied NLP and I understood the power of the subconscious and the power of language, even our own internal dialogue, for example. And I said, okay, now this is fascinating. This is powerful. This can really make a shift for people. But I wanted to understand more. I wanted to understand optimal brain health and how does the brain process thoughts and feelings and emotions, and how does
Mm-hmm.
that get encoded as memory, and how can we unlock that? And then I got interested in positive psychology because I wanted to understand, okay, well, if psychology took us from being unwell to being neutral, positive psychology is essentially the study of happiness. So how do we go from here, from neutral to up here to optimal well-being and vitality? And so that set me on this path. And I've used all of that research and my 25-year career in mindset coaching and consulting. And I thought, I'm going to put together a set of simple strategies that I can teach people in just 6 weeks. And so enters the book, 6 Weeks to Happy, and the rewire system, which is essentially a really simple methodology, 3 tools per week that can be learned and implemented in just 10 minutes per day over a 6-week period that can bring massive change to people. It doesn't matter if you're looking for more joy, more time, more energy, better health, greater wealth and abundance. You want the life of your dreams. It is possible, and there is an end point. I feel like we're all running this marathon with no finish line. And I said, enough, enough. There's got to be a solution. And so now I think I found it. And I was recording the audiobook and I just was so lit up because I thought this is so powerful. And I'm excited to be here with you today and get to share it with your audience.
Or how that is a fantastic, like what a great backstory. And the fact that, and I, as I was listening to you, I'm thinking about, and I'm here in Australia, and I'm thinking about some of the things that are going on in right here, right now, about apartheid, and some of the things that you were speaking about, that segregation, and why is that so, and then how does that play into, and I'm then starting to think about, well, how does that then play into our children's future and what that looks like for them and what impact that might have for them. So like I said right at the beginning, this show is extremely topical in this moment because we've got so many things going on and so many pieces, I suppose, information coming at us from all sorts of different formats, mainstream media, social media, and the like, that then plays into creating the thoughts, creating, those feelings and things that we start to manifest inside our own minds. So I'm excited to unpackage this today and understand, what were the steps? Like, what did you actually do? What did you find? And then the rewire system that you put together to help people to understand, how do you start to take control of those thoughts? How do your thoughts actually play in to the way in which we feel? So let's start there with, once you understood that, hey, these thoughts that we have, and 95% of what happens with us and that formulates our happiness is actually happening at the subconscious level. So let's talk about that first and foremost, the subconscious level. What did you find? What did you discover? And how is that? How have you started to create your program around the subconscious mind?
Great questions. My goodness. So firstly, the whole idea of the subconscious and coaching so many hundreds of people over the years, I started to see patterns in the data and I started to see patterns in what people were experiencing. And what it came down to was, most of us have fears and self-doubt and patterns that show up in our lives, but they really fall into five main buckets, I would say. And I don't have time to go through all of them probably in this show, but I'll talk about a couple of them. I talked about my own story, which was the not enough story. And what I realized was, wow, this is really universal. It doesn't matter who I seem to be speaking to. It doesn't matter if I'm speaking to, a 25-year-old out of college or university and just starting her way on her career and trying to figure out who she is and what she wants to do. Or it's someone at that midpoint in their life at 45 or so where their career is like maybe peaking, or maybe they're looking for a career change or some big shift in their life because something's not working. Or if I'm talking to a high level CEO, um, most people experience some version of this story. And it may not always sound like I'm not enough or I'm not good enough. It could start like, I don't know if I'm educated enough to create that sort of wealth. I would love to have that sort of life and be able to travel 3 or 4 times a year and be able to, stay in 5-star resorts and live like the stars. That life's not for everyone. So it might sound something a little bit different, but when you're trained in the language of the subconscious, like I am, you hear it very quickly and you see it very quickly. And then once you study so many different people, you just start to see patterns in how they're looking and how they're feeling, because you have someone show up as a coach who looks really well put together, smart, capable, and you're thinking, why aren't they able to get what they need to get? Whether that's, a health and fitness goal, whether that's a money and career goal, whether that's a goal in love and relationships, what's preventing us really from having all that we want to have and to be all that we want to be? And so that became fascinating for me. And so the not enough story can also sound like, like other things, like I always choose the wrong type of partner, or I seem to choose people that are emotionally unavailable. Okay, but there's a common denominator. And if we're the ones doing the choosing, then there's two people in each relationship there. So, what's your pattern that may be working in the background, that may be working in your subconscious, that could be sabotaging your ability to be happy or to find that love and connection and partnership and support that you seek? So it might sound a little bit different. Another one of those common fears is the I'm alone in the world. And again, it might not sound like that. It might sound more natural. Like someone would say, if you want something done, you have to do it yourself. If you want something done right or well, you have to do it yourself. Or, I've never really been able to rely on anyone. I kind of always looked after myself in life. That's that underlying story. The undercurrent of that story in the subconscious is, I'm alone in this world. There's really nobody there to look after me and support me. Now, that's great. It can give you some drive and it can give you that hunger to succeed. But how does it impact you in your personal relationships? Do you really allow people in? Do you really allow your partner to feel like they're needed, or that you can depend on them, or that you belong together, that they're a viable part of your partnership and part of your life? And then how does it impact you in business? So if you have this feeling of the story running in the background of I'm alone, well, do you rely on your business partner and your team enough? Or do you mostly delegate or manage from a different place? So how it
Yeah.
impacts us is really interesting. So I became fascinated with how to unpack that, and I figured out how to do it for myself. And then I wanted to unlock, unless you're going to work with a coach or a therapist yourself and really get into your personal story, I was trying to figure out for years, how can I do this in a way and give people the tools so they can start this journey themselves. And as I started learning about emotional intelligence and positive psychology, part of why we get stuck is really just because we're not able to acknowledge and recognize our own patterns. We're not able to acknowledge and recognize our own emotions sometimes because we only recognize the happy ones, the positive ones, right? We don't recognize the negative ones like fear, self-doubt, or frustration or stress. We wake up, we feel a level of stress and anxiety. What do? We hit the mute button and we get busy with our day because we're so used to like a baseline of this level of stress. But it doesn't have to be your story. And that was probably one of the most powerful discoveries is this doesn't have to be your story. It started long before you had the power to choose. It started when we were children. And a lot of these things, whether it's belief systems around love or health or money or how life should be, whether it should be easy or whether it should be a struggle, they all got programmed at a very, very young age. But it doesn't have to be your story for life. You can actually find the tools and you can rewrite the story so that you can be more powerful. So that was the first step. And then I learned all of these neat little tools from so many different disciplines. And I was sitting there one day and I thought, this is it. I studied countless methodologies and did so much training and coaching in my consulting and coaching career. And I said, I was asking myself, why did I shift careers from, being in the tech world on one side into wanting to coach people and help people full time? And I realized there was a method, there was a whole reason to my path, if you believe that there are no accidents, which I do. And I realized this is my mission. This is what I was meant to do. I was meant to take all of these different tools from all of these disciplines and create something that can teach people how to get there themselves. And the thing about me is I'm very left brain. So I need the science, I need the data, I need to understand it. It has to be proven to me. And then I need it to be quick, simple, and efficient. So that's how I created the rewire system. And that's the methodology I talk about in the book.
I love it. You're speaking my language. It's actually a book that Vicky Helm and I wrote that came out last year called The She-Myth. Actually, it's this book right here that talks about a lot of the things that you are talking about today and about the fact that, we take on a lot of these beliefs at a very young age. They're instilled into us and we carry them with us for a very long time. So one of the things that if you don't know how to rewire as you're now teaching people. So although you've got to the point where you understood and you could sort of look at, well, what are these patterns? What are these habits that I have been doing over and over and over again? How would somebody else sort of take a step back, and maybe they do need to hit the pause button, the mute button for just a moment to actually have a look in the rear vision mirror and say, well, what are some of these patterns? What do I want in my life? Like, firstly, I think, we need to have a clear understanding of where the heck do I want to go? What do I actually want to achieve? Because often we go through, people go through life, right, with no real idea. They just sort of wake up in the morning, as you say, they might hit mute, but just carry on our day with no real intention or purpose about what we're doing. So I would imagine that's, to me, that's the first step is like, where are you going? Know where you're going. You don't start to jump in a car and start a journey without actually knowing what the destination is or where you're trying to get to. So that might be your first step. But then understanding that if they've tried that, sometimes people have jumped in that car and they've tried to get to that destination many a time, but for whatever reason, they hit a brick wall, an obstacle, a challenge, and they just kind of, it veers them off track and they end up, let's say down in the ditch. So how does one recognize what these recurring patterns are, and how does somebody recognize them and then do something about breaking them?
Great question. I'll break it apart into a few different pieces. So first we talked about the subconscious patterns. And in the book, what I've done is I've taken those 5 main patterns and I've sort of mapped them out in terms of some of the variations and how it can show up in your life. Because like I said, so that not enough story doesn't always sound like not enough. And the not alone, I'm alone story doesn't always sound just like that. So I've got some variations in terms of how it can play out in your life so that you can start to see yourself in each of those. Now, we don't have all 5 usually. Most of us have 1 or 2 of those big ones operating within us. So you're not going to feel all five all at once. Otherwise, gosh, we wouldn't be able to get out of bed at all. But the important thing is if you can recognize it and you can have an awareness about it, then you can figure out how to shift it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So once you've learned something about yourself, the next time it shows up, you can actually recognize it and say, oh, that's what this is. I'm going to choose not to get on this automatic train anymore and go on autopilot. I can just pause. And there's that little space where you get to actually have a choice and say, you know what, I'm going to choose to respond to this situation differently. It doesn't matter if it's in love or in business or in terms of health. The other piece that you talked about was, you know, most people are sort of meandering through life almost like without a map. Well, life didn't come with an instruction booklet, and unfortunately school teaches us so many great things. You know, we learn how to add and subtract and multiply and fractions, and we learn about history and English and world affairs and all of this, but we don't really learn about happiness or what we need, or we don't even learn about values. Values are what's important to us. And what's important to you is going to be different than your spouse or your partner, your kids, your siblings, your business partner, your friends. And so to really tap into what specifically do you need to be happy? That's another thing, is we go through life and we're sort of given these instructions that are very generic. It's go to school, get good grades, get a job, choose a career, start making more money. At some point, you may decide to stay in your career, advance in your career, or start your own business. And then it's, get married, have children, buy a house, get the car, and you'll arrive at this destination called happiness and success, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. So why not? And I think part of the reason is, well, we're not really asked what makes you happy and what do you need right now? What do you need each week or each day to really make you feel like your most excited, most vibrant self, that you're living your life with purpose? You know the difference when you meet someone and they say, oh yeah, I'm doing well, but you can see written on their face that they're carrying so much stress and tension. And you can see another friend that says, oh my God, I couldn't be happier. And you feel that. You feel that energetically because it's vibrating through them. So what's the difference in the two? And I think what we figured out is, if you can really tap into, first of all, how to figure out the sources of your stress and anxiety. And some of that resides in your subconscious, and you figure out your patterns, you can start to move them aside. Then you learn, and all of this is in the rewire system as well. Then you learn the importance of quieting the mind, because if we have evolved to be really good at stress, we have a built-in, it's called a negativity bias in the positive psychology world. And what that means is we're on high alert for danger all the time. We evolved to be really good at survival. We have a built-in stress response called the fight or flight response. And how it works is it acts as a gas pedal that gets pushed. And that used to serve us well when we used to, live in the bush as cavemen, and there was a real predator around. That adrenaline rush helped us flee to safety. And once we were safe, our brains then signaled our bodies to say, you're safe, it's okay, there's no more threat, you can calm down. But in today's day and age, when life is so busy, think of your phone pinging. How many different avenues can you get a message these days? All your social media channels, and people can direct message you. How many inboxes do we all have on email? Most of us have more than one. We have voicemail, we have text message, we have WhatsApp. It's endless. And so let's say you have 10 channels on your phone pinging, and every single one is something that needs your time and energy right now. So every time that happens, we're basically triggering that stress response over and over and over. And what we've done is, over time, we've unknowingly, unconsciously trained our stress response and strengthened it, just like you would train a muscle at the gym. And we've forgotten that we actually have a natural ability to be calm. So part of the rewire system is teaching the techniques to retrain the brain and the central nervous system, your vagus nerve, back to getting calm. Once you're calm and you've removed the causes of your stress, Then we can examine your life in a whole new way. We can pull some things apart that need reprioritizing. We can take away the things that are just extra noise. And then once you've done that, then you have a space to say, okay, now what makes you happy? What
Mm,
is the vision that you have for your life? And we get to dive in. And one of the most interesting things was, over coaching hundreds of people, when you're a coach, you're called upon to help people map out a plan from where they are now to where they want to be. Right. And then so you separate it into micro goals and you help them build out a plan and you follow up and make sure that they're accountable and they're hitting all of their targets. But as I started to work through some of these goals with some of my clients, I realized an astonishingly high number of people couldn't actually tell me what that goal would bring them in terms of more
mm,
peace, more joy, more freedom, more flexibility. It was like it was an autopilot goal that was given to them. Oh, if I reached, this goal or had this country house or this career or this salary, maybe that would be the key to unlocking my happiness. But I realized a lot of them couldn't even answer what makes you happy as a question. So I said,
yeah.
okay, let's dial it back. And you've had this experience, yes,
Hmm. Oh, yeah. And I'm nodding my head for the those that are listening on a podcast. I'm nodding my head because this is a question that I've actually asked. Even some people close to me. What actually makes you happy? And like you say, they can't answer that. They don't know the answer to that question. So that leads us to, how do you then, because it's almost as if, based on what you're explaining, I'm sort of imagining that people are going through life and it's as if you've got this haze or this veil over you and you think, okay, well, I think this is what my life should look like. When I get to that destination, then I'll be happy. If I have that amount of money in my bank account and I drive that car and I have that fancy house and I have that partner and this number of kids and therefore, I'll be happy then. And what you're talking about is really, unlocking all of that, unveiling all of that, stepping back and saying, really, really, is that really what's going to make you happy? And getting to the crux of what is really going to make you happy? What is the real
Yes.
difference here? And then almost resetting that GPS, so to speak, so that they were heading in one direction that they thought was the pathway to happiness, when in fact they actually stopped. They re-looked at I'm going to say in inverted commas, the map of their life, where do I want to go and what do I want to do, and realize that actually it's not over there. It might be right here. Actually, in most cases, it's right there in front of us, and we don't often see that. We're blinded by the fact that we're looking so far in the distance that that's where we think happiness is, on the horizon, when in fact it's actually right there at our feet.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people have that experience. So, one of the things I did was I created a template to help people sort of map this out for themselves. So, if we break down your life into, the life wheel, so spiritual, soulful, financial, mental and intellectual, family and social, physical needs, and we sort of break it down into lots of different areas. And I've got it to a point where we have people actually go through exercises. So there are three parts to this book, and the last part is a workbook where people actually go through these exercises with me as their coach, and I walk them through how to actually map out your needs. So for example, if you have a need to be, if you're a highly sociable person and your chosen partner is somebody more quiet, more introspective, who doesn't need that much social contact, well, how does that work? Are you constantly struggling and negotiating how to spend your time? Or if you were to sit down and just understand each other's needs, could you then meet at a common point and say, "Oh, I get it now." I'll give you an example of that. I had just a colleague of mine that I was working with, and she was explaining to me how when she very successful speaker as well, and she was explaining that when she was at her lake house, she loves that peace and quiet, and to the point where, when she would sit down and have dinner with her partner, she wouldn't even speak to him. And so,
Mm.
routinely they would spend, a few weeks in the summer at the lake house, and then he would make plans to meet with some friends. And she really felt hurt. She took it personally and thought, well, am I not enough? Am I not enough to keep, to keep them stimulated? The fact was, she liked her downtime. She needed her quiet time, and she needed this many hours after a bout of, marathon work, or even just day to day or week to week. And her partner needed something different. He needed more social contact, and it wasn't personal. They just really needed to understand each other's needs and then be able to negotiate to make sure that he had what he needed, and then she got the peace and quiet that she needed. And so
Mm.
it's the really simple tools and really simple formulas. But again, because we're not taught these things, how do we know? How do we know to be able to schedule those things into our life and just shift things around? And it's small tweaks. It's just a little course correction or reprioritizing of your day, but life suddenly becomes so much more manageable. You don't feel
Yeah.
stretched so much. And then the other piece of that is values. So really
Mm-hmm.
tapping into what is important to you. So, one of my top values is freedom, for example. So it's very difficult for me to be in a relationship that would be codependent, or in a relationship where someone requires a lot of my time and presence constantly. I'm very loving. I have clients that are very loving, but if your top value is freedom, you need to be able to negotiate that sense of independence within your relationship, and then within
Mm-hmm.
your careers as well. Because if you like freedom, if you're anything like me, I hated doing the 9 to 5 grind Monday to Friday and having to be somewhere. So it's no shock that I've chosen a different life plan for myself. And you mentioned at the start of the call today that, I'm living in Miami, and it must be happy
Mm-hmm.
to be living a nice quality of life in a place like this. Sure, it is easy to have a beautiful quality of life in Miami, but I wasn't born here. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in South Africa, and then I lived in Canada, and I lived in Europe. I chose Miami because I knew that having an important quality of life, having a good quality of life, and being outdoors in the fresh air was one of my core needs. I couldn't do that in February in Canada, where it's minus 30 Celsius, which
Yeah.
is about, I don't know what that would be here.
Cold.
0? Yeah, very,
Very
very
cold.
cold. So cold that when you breathe in, the air doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have time to warm up before it hits your lungs, and it actually hurts your chest. You can't be outdoors in that kind of weather. So, it was really a personal choice once I understood who I was and I unpacked my personal needs and then figured out what is important to me. So, if I had a couple I was coaching, and his name was Glenn, and he was married to a lovely woman who loved spontaneity. Now, Glenn had some issues growing up where you know, he had some loss at an early age, so he had fear of abandonment. So what he came to value was stability. So he likes
Mm.
things if they are planned in advance. If things shift around, it creates a sense of discomfort for him that he couldn't explain. His wife, on the other hand, totally spontaneous, happy go lucky. And it was the simplest of things. They had plans one Saturday to go out, and they said, "What should we do today?" And she said, "Why don't we do a long walk and go for a nice long lunch?" And then and he said, "Great." And, she remembered she had some shopping to do. And so she said, "Do you mind if we make a pit stop at this little shop?" And as they walked in, I mean, she was shopping. He agreed to shopping. So she started to browse around and enjoy her shopping moment. And his entire mood shifted, and it ruined the entire weekend for them. And they couldn't figure out why. And I sat with them and was coaching through them and realized, oh, okay, so he just really values stability and routine. And it's not that he's inflexible, but he just needs to be communicated that things are going to change, and be very direct about what those changes are so that he can not have that discomfort anymore. So now they're able to figure out plans, they're able to change plans, and he doesn't get as stressed anymore because they figured out how to manage that in a way that works for both of them. So it's the simple little tweaks, that nobody talks about. And it's those soft skills about tapping into our own emotions and what we need, and figuring out how to unpack that for each other to really support each other.
I love the fact that you've come at this from a very, I'm going to say, logical standpoint. Like you mentioned earlier that, you're a very left brain. You need to know, what is the data telling me? What are these facts? How do I need to understand this, and then have gone away and unpackaged it and then repackaged it in a way that, anybody can use to be able to rewire their thinking and actually change their life in just a matter of 6 short weeks by breaking it down into those rewired components. So I want to make sure that everybody knows where they can get a copy of your book. Let me pop that up on the screen. So Zahra, where's the best place for them to go to get a copy of your book?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Yes, they can either go to the company name, so they can go to www.getzend.com. That's GETZEND.com or ZEND, depending on where you are. Or you could go to just 6weekstohappy.com and you can find it there.
All right, well, let's just pop this up on the screen so everybody knows. Or 6weekstohappy.com. Head on over there and get yourself a copy of Zahra's book. And I love the fact that you're very, you've broken this down into simple steps, like taking something that to a lot of people might be quite complex, and you've studied a long time to unpackage and demystify a lot of this, but you've actually now put it together in very simple steps that people can do just over the 6 week period. So if they head on over to getzen.com or 6weekstohappiness.com, you'd be able to get yourself a copy of the book, and then obviously use Zahra as your coach throughout that process. Like she said, she's there holding your hand every step of the way. What's interesting about all of this is that you can then shift from having a life that's just kind of, oh well, whatever today brings will bring, to really having a life by design. And when you start looking at things, because you've just looked at this from a completely different angle to most, right? It's like, I want to redesign this. The reason that I'm in the place that I'm in right now was actually very intentional and purposeful. I knew that these were the things that I valued. I value my freedom. I value, being out in the outdoors. I value fresh air, all of those sorts of things. So then you've purposely gone and said, well, the place that I need to be is here. And obviously we go through life, we have a journey. You've been, South Africa, Canada, so on and so forth. And the journey has brought you to where you are today. But it's been very much created through design, and yet not just through, a series of mishaps and events, really.
Correct. Yes. I think to create any change in your life, there are three parts. It's the, SBA of life. It's not the Small Business Administration. It is strategy, beliefs, and then taking action, right? So you need a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew something wasn't working. It wasn't just being in winter and needing fresh air. It was the fact that when the days were shorter and it was cold and I was unable to get outside, I was actually suffering from seasonal depression for 3 months out of the year. To live like that. And so I thought I need a new strategy where, life can just feel easier. I can just be able to make different choices. So one is you need a strategy to figure out, and if you have a coach or a great mentor, then great, go to that person. If not, and then the other thing is you need the beliefs. So you talked about having a vision for your life, right? So if you're meandering through life, it's like going through life with an outdated map. You need a vision, and you need to know that vision is going to be something that really excites you and lights you up, and it's going to be the life that you want, not what everyone else says you should have. Because honestly, if somebody says to have a big house and you're actually happier living on a houseboat or camping in a caravan, then do that.
Yeah.
But really dial into what your unique needs are, what your values are. And once you've dialed down the noise, then you can actually figure out, okay, you've figured out what beliefs were stopping you. Now you can rewrite that story and say, what do I need to have in place to have the life I want? So for example, mindset is everything. So if you go and learn 100 wealth strategies to create more money so that you can have that financial freedom you seek, because I don't think money and creating wealth is really the means itself. I think what people really want when they want wealth is they want to have fun, for number one. I mean, it
Mhm.
allows you to do so many beautiful things in life and to really have some extraordinary experiences and pleasures in life. But it also gives you a sense of freedom, not just to go on a holiday, but freedom from worry. Knowing
Yeah.
that certainty that your bills are paid, that your family is looked after, that you don't have to worry about retirement. You know that most people at 50 years old have about 50 grand in the bank. That's a scary prospect. If you want to
Mhm.
live a decent quality of life and retire, you need to have about 1.4, $1.5 million in the bank. So if you're 50
Mhm.
years old and you've got 50K in the bank, imagine how much stress is within us every day that we're carrying. All that fear, all that worry. Well, don't you want to unpack that and move beyond? So you take that same person, unpack all the beliefs that are stopping them from having wealth and acquiring that state of being and that financial freedom right now, and you unpack that, teach them new beliefs so that they knew they could not fail, and you teach them 100 strategies for creating wealth, and I guarantee you they will.
Yeah,
It's a game
absolutely.
changer.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? So that question that we often ask is, what would you do if you knew that there was no opportunity for you to fail? What would you do in life? And when you sit back and you actually ask yourself that, all sorts of things may come up. You're going to start to create that really unpack some of the things that you deeply desire to do because you've just removed the fear, the anxiety, etc., that goes with it, that veil that you've put over the top that's actually prevented you from moving forward. I absolutely love this conversation because it's so it's right up my alley in terms of unlocking the life that we want, because we should be living our life in an unlocked manner across our business, our family, and our entire life, because they all, in my opinion, they're all part of the one thing. There's no segregation required when you look at things from that perspective. And when you can stop for a moment, like you're saying, and you can look at, okay, well, what are some of these beliefs, what are some of the things that have been holding me back, and you can start to rewrite that story. Because often we take these stories with us through life thinking that they are set in concrete, that they're written into the book, therefore they were in the past, therefore they're going to be in the future, which is not true. You can continue to rewrite that book. The next chapter can look vastly different to the very first chapter. So I would encourage everybody to go and get yourself a copy of Zahra's book, 6 Weeks to Happiness, so that you can start working on these things. If you've found yourself, you might say, hey, I'm really happy with my life, but maybe there's just something that's been holding you back. It could be the littlest of things. Buying that book and going, taking her up on her offer to actually coach you through the process through her book may just be the one thing that you need to really open that door open wide and unlock a few locks that have been, locked shut, that have prevented you from really having the life and the business and the love that you want. So I would encourage you guys to
Thank
do
you.
that. I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. This has been an absolute pleasure having this conversation. Who doesn't love talking about happiness, right?
Thank you so much, Tracy. It's been such a pleasure. And honestly, I'm so excited. I love your whole premise, and the whole unlock concept is so on point for what I'm doing, as well as trying to find those little secrets and those little padlocks, and give people the keys so that they can take this away and really create change. And what's really more fun is, even, once we've unpacked all of this, we don't just get to create a new story. I have people create a new vision for their life. And then we have another set of tools where we get to just blow it up and go even bigger and really elevate and expand our vision. So we may have been thinking we're capable of achieving here, and all of a sudden
Mm,
it's here. And imagine how beautiful life would be then. If you really want to tap
absolutely.
into, yeah, if you really want to tap into how to do that for yourself, there are hundreds of strategies I can teach you to improve the quality of your life. But what I've done is I've taken the top 18 strategies, really simple tools that you can master in 10 minutes per day over a 6 week period. And the 6 weeks we didn't even touch on, so I'll just touch on it really quickly.
Oh,
In the neuroscience world, we understand now that there's research that says the brain actually shows signs of lasting change within 6 weeks. So we're not just shifting out of old thought patterns and old strategies and old feelings and old behaviors, but we're putting in place new ones, and then we're hardwiring it in. So this will be lasting change for better health, greater wealth, and more happiness. I'm super
So
excited. Thank you so much, Tracy.
you're very welcome. And I think what I want to finish on today with is, this
Mhm.
lasting change that Zahra talks about. It's really about a transformation. So over that 6 weeks, I can imagine you're going to look back at yourself. You almost like take a still photo of you in this moment. You start the process with Zahra over 6 weeks, and then look back and see what transformation your life actually has. Because once you get that transformation, there actually is no going back. You've already started to pave the way for this brand new life that you are creating. So thank you so much. I absolutely love your work. Thank you for being here today and sharing your wisdom with everybody. I hope everybody takes you up on your offer, because what's life without happiness? We need to make sure that we are, you're only here, they say, short time, not a long time. We want to make sure that this is a great opportunity that we have, and we take every advantage of it. So go get yourself a copy of Zahra's book, and we'll see you guys back here again on another episode of The Unlocked Show. I'm Tracy Wilson. We'll be here again next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Brisbane time, with another awesome guest. Thanks so much, Zahra, and I'll see you again soon, no doubt. I'll be getting a copy of your book, and we'll be sharing that with the rest of our audience as we move forward too. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you guys again next week. Bye for now.